Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. I'm delighted this Friday afternoon to be joined by Colin Watt. Colin, the first thing I'm going to say, you know I'm a Jersey pervert.
It's a family show, Paul. Come on.
Yes, I know. That's an interesting take on the old centenary top, isn't it? They released it. I think they released retro tops in black and silver. Am I right?
Is that black, silver, and I think there was a sort of dark green one as well.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
What was the thinking of that? Because obviously they weren't out in the centenary year in that colourway. So was it just really tapping into the kind of retro market with a twist?
So. Yeah, I think so. Looking at the jersey, obviously the main thing is the badge. The badge is one of the best we've had. I think between that and the one for the 125th with the cross, that was beautiful as well. As you say, I think it's just Celtic trying to expand their range, because this is it's a Celtic own brand product. I'm not sure who the production or manufacturing company is, but I know there's like certain ones like Score Draw who've been doing the retros for years. And actually the sad news, I found out today that Toffs, who've been doing a lot of the retro tops that are based in Sunderland, they're going out of business.
Really?
Yeah, strange one.
They have been going for years.
Yeah, they've done a lot of the Scotland retros, and I know they were doing some of Celtic's early ones as well, but yeah, they're going out of business, so it's sad to hear that. But I think it's more and more common. You see a lot more takes on retro jerseys now. But yeah, this one, it was just a nice one. Do you know what it would be nice as an away kit? The sort of silvery grey colour. I know obviously we had that one that looked as if it was straight out of an episode of Dale Winton's Hole in the Wall years ago, with the pink sort of arrow pointing down to the groin area.
Right. That kit there, never worn, Colin, never worn in a competitive game. We're talking the silver and pink number, which I have over there. Thank you to Lloyd Patrick Jepson for giving me it. I'm going to stick that in the mannequin next week, right? We've got this old return to the old lime green, which always reminds me of Paddy McCourt, that.
Yeah.
So I've got the pink and the grey one over there. I'm getting some of the ex-players to sign it to try and make it look okay. I think the problem they had with that is the colour scheme. Listen, we'll move on from jerseys, I promise. It could have been like a yellow and black classic with a chevron on it, but it wasn't. It was just, I think there's still 15,000 of them in a storeroom somewhere underneath Celtic Park, next to the bank vault.
It wouldn't surprise me. Honestly, that bank vault will probably be full as well, considering the most recent accounts. But that jersey was a horrendous attempt at a jersey. And it's bad when you don't see a lot of people wearing it. Like, we've had some bad kits over the last 5-10 years. And you still see people out wearing them, but I never seen anyone, I don't think, wear that silver and pink number. I just don't I don't understand the arrow. Why was it pointing down to someone's groin area?
Well, they said it was some kind of loose link to an old away jersey way back, 1920s or something like that. Do you want me to wear it, or will I put it in the mannequin? Probably the mannequin.
Yeah, put it in the mannequin.
That will be the best. What are we going to be chatting about today? Well, we're back to league action this weekend. Tomorrow we face Hearts. Of course, they're 6th in the league. They seem to have had a bit of an upturn. We'll be having a look at that. Yesterday, big day for Acsom yesterday, up at Celtic Park. Chris was in a press conference with Paulo Bernardo, hence the tagline, I have a theory that there's going to be two superstars from Portugal that are going to lead us to the treble, and Bernardo is obviously one of them, Jota being the other, and I've got a theory around that. We're going to have a look at it as well. We're going to be looking at comments by Kundai Benyu, because we followed Kundai Benyu's career closely after he left Celtic, all the way down to non-league in England. He's now back playing in Zimbabwe and shouting his mouth off about Brendan Rodgers. It's always somebody else's fault, Colin. And we'll also be talking about the protest tomorrow. We've got a special guest coming in at 1 o'clock to give us a wee bit more information about the fan protest at London Road Police Station. Let's start off then. Yesterday, Paulo Bernardo was up at Celtic Park. First thing I noticed was the fact that he looks as though he's bulked up a bit. He said he was doing a lot of gym work. Obviously, he couldn't do the normal training, so he's obviously just basically changed the focus on the upper body by the look of him. And he says if selected, he will be playing this weekend. Colin, it's not that whole thing, the Derek Riordan effect. The longer he doesn't play, the better he becomes. The cremola foam effect, the longer it's away, the better it was. It was actually vile. Let's be honest. Unless you put it in vodka, cremola foam was horrible. You'll not even remember before your time. Before your time. It's not a case of that. I think Paulo Bernardo, somebody pointed out yesterday that he has appeared in quite a lot of games this season, which I get. But in terms of his starts and his minutes, he's not had that, that run of games, Colin, where he can get right into his stride and start to influence the play, which I think he can, and I think he showed it last season. My take on this is Bernardo's coming back to full fitness. Jota is probably coming up to match sharpness, and I think both of those players are going to be pivotal in the running to the treble. What's your take on it?
Yeah, that last part that you touched on with Jota, that was very evident in the Derby game before the break. You could tell, as good as he was at stages, there was still that lack of match sharpness. And I think we spoke about it last week. You were saying I can't remember who you turned to, you'll name drop them again at some point.
Bobby Petter.
Is that who it was? Oh, Bobby Primark. And said he just didn't look as if he was up to speed. And that is the benefit, I guess, of these tedious international breaks, is you get that chance to, as Paulo said, be in the gym, hit it hard, try and build up, and get yourself back to match sharpness. I know that some teams will use that sort of time out to maybe go in a warm weather training camp, or they'll go and do something else. Others will play bounce games. I know there was a couple of Scottish teams played some bounce games. I wouldn't be surprised if Celtic were involved in that. We just never find out when they've happened, really, unless someone mentions it. So I'm sure that the sort of effects of the Derby game will have started to have worn off, but we still need that hunger going into this game on Saturday. As you say, Hearts have definitely had that revival under Neil Critchley this season. Back in, pushing towards the top six. They've got a couple of decent players in there as well. At the back, they seem to have just about sorted out their issues, unless you're Jamie McCart and you're scoring on goals. But they seem to have sort of worked that one out. And up front, you just don't want to give Kabangu any opportunities in front of goal, because he's been pretty lethal so far this season. So it'll be a good game. I think it'll be two teams that want to come out and play football, which is always a better game at Celtic Park, when two teams actually want to get forward and try and score goals. I think the Aberdeen game, as much as people were saying it was a bit tedious, that was two teams that wanted to go and attack. And I'd rather that than having to try and break down 11 players to get anywhere near the goal. So I'm looking forward to Saturday. A 3:00 kickoff for the first time in what feels like a long time. Potentially the last one of the season, after they've moved the Kilmarnock game to 12:30. So yeah, all signs hopefully for 3 points.
Yeah, I hope so, Colin. Yesterday, I've got to apologise. Yesterday, we've won so many trebles, you see, Colin, that I forget about some of them. And I mentioned that we've had 4 managers who have won a treble at Celtic. There's actually 5. I absolutely forgot to mention Ange Postecoglou. I didn't forget about Ange. I'll never forget about Ange. How could I possibly forget about the big man? But I didn't, and I failed to mention his treble win yesterday. And I think I did the same last night. Nobody pulled me up for it. Last night was phenomenal. We were at Barra's Art and Design. And Martin O'Neill was our guest on the stage. And what I do with these events, Colin, is you try your best to get a freshness to them, and you try and change your guests, etc. But every now and again, if I get an opportunity once a year to bring Martin O'Neill along with Acsom, either to Greenock, because you were at the Greenock gig, or to Glasgow, you're going to do it, right? And there's always more people want to come. People come back and watch them again, even though some of the stories remain the same. And last night, absolutely sold out. 350 tickets sold. There's the capacity. Another 50 on the waiting list. People want to hear Martin O'Neill, and it's no wonder. It's no wonder that people want to hear him. Barra's Art and Design, phenomenal venue, up for about 4 awards this year in that industry, and I can see why. Great staff and everything else. So thanks everybody for coming out. We don't take it for granted. The weather was horrific last night, Colin, going into Glasgow. The road conditions, the weather conditions, terrible. You came out, and the big question always is, can you do it? You might be a good player, but can you do it on a Thursday night, a wet Thursday night at Bad? Martin O'Neill can. We also had Davy McKendrick on the live music. We had big screen visuals, Colin, and we're trying to add different elements to these live events. And one of the elements that we actually mixed up last night was our introduction was by none other than our very own Kevin Graham, who walked on that stage, and he recited a brand new poem And the response from the crowd was phenomenal. Now, thankfully, someone has forwarded me the video of said poem, and I'm going to share that on the socials. Kevin has given me permission to do that. If you were at the gig, let me know how you found it and how it was. I had a fantastic time. I think I asked 6 questions, and we were on the stage for 90 minutes. So that shows you he's a storyteller, Colin. And you know what? Very, very humble with it, because I keep going on about a generation of domination. 25 years, that's a generation of us dominating Scottish football, right? And there's been a couple of wee moments, obviously, in that time. Martin O'Neill started that ball rolling on the park, didn't he? I know that Fergus started the ball rolling in terms of a business in the stadium and getting us on a level footing. But Martin O'Neill's the man, isn't it, when it comes to actually changing the mindset of this football club?
Yeah, Martin O'Neill's sort of the first full-time manager that's like my era of watching Celtic. Like, obviously, first game I ever went to, we've spoken about this before, was the 99-2000 season. I think it was a 2-1 victory over Dundee United. Henrik Larsson comes back from the leg break, and you always go on about the fact he's got a moustache, how he goes. I also believe, was Mark Wilson playing that day for Dundee United? I think he might have scored a penalty that day for them.
Good question. I'll need to check that on the wiki. I know that we played a lot of youngsters because...
Yeah, we were playing like John Kennedy and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of young guys. And that came down to, and I was told this, another name drop, shameless name drop. This was Andy Lynch when he was writing his book. And he told me Simon Lynch, his son, played that day. And that was all down to Tommy Burns. So Tommy was saying to Kenny, look, this is a nothing game. There's nothing to play for. Let's get the young guys in. And I think they ended up playing 7 or 8 youngsters. I reckon if you look at the team, it's probably the youngest in age of any starting 11 that's ever started for Celtic at that stage. There was something in the Celtic View that week that might have explained that. But there was, John Kennedy made his debut when he was 16.
Yeah, 16. I think it was Mark Fotheringham playing as well at 16. There's a couple others. So the Simon Lynch story, the Simon Lynch thing's quite interesting. I always remember, I think it wasn't Anil's first season, it was maybe his second season. We played at Tynecastle and the league was already wrapped up. And I think he'd scored 2 and Sean Maloney scored 2 and Celtic got a penalty. And the two of them fought over it. And I think Simon took it and missed it.
That's right.
I can't imagine that would have been fun in the changing room afterwards. But I think the only one I would say would be close to that would maybe be when Celtic played Stirling Albion in the League Cup under Martin O'Neill. I think they won 8-0 at that game. And again, that was a game where we rolled out the youngsters as well. And I think that might have been either Stubbs or Weghorst's first games back after treatment as well.
That's pretty memorable, The thing for me, Colin, with the young guys, obviously they don't all make it. Jimmy Goodwin played for Celtic that day.
Yeah, at centre-half.
Yeah, now Dundee United manager, of course. And we're facing Hearts this weekend, so it's interesting that you remember that. The other occasions, some of the old school, there is an older school than the school I'm at, by the way. Some of the old school might remember other occasions, but I do recall you were talking about 2 guys falling out over a penalty kick. I remember during Ronnie Dyler's time, Stefan Johansson and Lee Griffiths did the same. Now, I'd need to check if the kick was scored. I remember being at Ibrox the season with Samaras Sunday. I remember the following game at Ibrox, the nothing each game. And Chris Commons and Samaras, there was a coming together for the penalty, remember? Samaras takes it.
Missed it.
And he misses it. So it doesn't bode well if there's a wee bit of conflab. In the modern game, we should know who's taking the penalties, Colin. There was one recently, was there not? Rio? There was one fairly recently. Rio wanted to take it, and it was given to someone else.
Yeah, was it not given to Arne Engels?
Yeah, so these are the things that, to this day, bemuse me, because everything is prepared to the nth degree when it comes to this level of football. Yet we don't know who the penalty kick taker is. Were you at Bad last night? Let us know how you enjoyed it. Daniel Hamilton, you're straight in. I'm going to stick my neck out and go for a 3-1 win tomorrow with an Ida brace. Well, does that mean Ida starting? We're going to be looking at the starting 11. We're going to be looking at the 2 Portuguese superstars who I think are going to excel between now and the end of the season. Very much like Jamesy Forrest last season, Colin, when he came in.
Yeah.
He played a massive part, didn't he? And I think the other 2 guys, Ida being one of them, but Bernardo as well, he played a huge part in the run-in last season.
it was sort of this time last season where we really kicked on, and I mean the points gap at this point last season was pretty close as well going in. I think it was either just before now or just round about now. We still had the 2 derby games left, and then there was obviously the famous 3-3 defeat at Ibrox that day. But we were struggling for a lot of those games. Like I think back to Fir Park when it was it 1 each going into the 91st minute before Ida comes on and scores. So this season's obviously been night and day. And Rodgers came out last year, and obviously there was the time with Santa Claus getting booed off the park and stuff like that. When you think back, it's funny now, but it wasn't that day. It's night and day from last season to this season. You can see the progress, but we're now at that stage where it's like everyone's just counting down the games so you can wrap it up. And it was going to be St Johnstone away. They gave us 3 stands. Now that's not happening. Is it going to be Kilmarnock? Is it going to be the first game after the split? Everybody's looking forward in that sense, but we've just got to focus and take each game one at a time. And that starts with Saturday's game against Hearts, because they'll give us a challenge for sure tomorrow. Earlier on in the season, you would have said they were looking like candidates for the bottom 6, potentially the relegation spots. I think both them and Hibs were 11th and 12th at one point. Yeah. But now they've sort of bounced back. Once they got Europe out their system, they've certainly bounced back. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see the lineup for tomorrow. I don't think there's too many changes. The commenter there, I've forgotten their name, sorry. The Ida brace, for me, if that's going to happen, that's going to need to be off the bench. I think Maeda, although he picked up that slight knock with Japan, I think he'll if he's fit, he'll be starting. He'll be through the middle. And apart from that, the big talking point, I guess, Paul, is the fact that we're going to be missing what looks like till the end of the season our big Danish goalkeeper, Kasper Schmeichel.
Absolutely. And that's been the subject really of the international break, Colin, when you think about it. Ida obviously getting his goal is a great thing. And it's good for guys like Ida to get the goal, Ralston to get minutes, etc. And that's like it's thin pickings when it comes to the positives out of the international break this time round. The worst issue being the fact that Kasper Schmeichel got that bad injury. Yesterday, just linking back into this press conference yesterday, we were initially told that there was going to be 2 people there. It was going to be a player and a manager. And obviously, Brendan Rodgers comes in. One of the first questions someone will ask him is about an injury update. We need to know about X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And on the day, Chris McAway, big shout out to Chris, who was a debutant when it came to press conference yesterday. That was his first one, and I thought he sounded really composed and confident. He says he was absolutely bricking it. They were told just beforehand that Brendan Rodgers wasn't attending and he was going to do a separate one today. So we'll probably get all the updates on the injuries, Colin, because we've not really got a timescale, have we, for Kasper Schmeichel coming back?
No, you're reading different things. There was at one point the sort of Danish doctors thought he might be out till September, which was quite worrying. Then there was an update later in the week that said it could be just a number of weeks, which still sort of ruled them out, I think, for the rest of the season pretty much. But yeah, you'd like to know a bit more. I think they were still waiting on the results of an MRI scan as well, so we can only wait. But this is a big opportunity now, and it really comes down to Brendan Rodgers' mindset here. Does he say that Sinisalo is his number 2 goalkeeper? Now, he played in the cup game against Raith Rovers. I thought he played okay. He wasn't really overly tested. Obviously, tomorrow he may not get tested depending on how well the defence plays. But he will get tested at some point between now and the end of the season. And then you've got the other option, which I can't say safe hands because he's made too many blunders anytime he's came in. But the sort of tried and tested Scott Bain. And it's whether Brendan Rodgers goes with what he knows or if he gives Sinisalo that opportunity. I would go with Sinisalo, but knowing the Rodgers mindset, I wouldn't be surprised to see Scott Bain taking that jersey.
Right, that is interesting because the last we heard, Benzo was still in the carpool, Colin, and I keep saying that he is definitely the player who has been an unused sub for Celtic more than any other. I've spoken to goalkeepers. We did a gig recently with Pat Bonner, and I said to him, in terms of you as a goalie, knowing that you're going to be a backup and basically sit on the bench, maybe get 1 or 2 appearances in an entire season, Colin, You know, at what point do you accept that as your kind of working life? Because you're training all week and you're not getting a game. The payoff is always the game, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we've had goalies like this in the past. I read a story the other day there about Logan Bailly. I don't know if you remember him.
Yep.
He was at Celtic for 3 or 4 years, and he did the same. He just on the bench. Zaluska, he was more of a perennial sub, wasn't he? An unused sub. And we also had, there's been a few down the years of players that were signed as almost like a kind of backup goalie. And I think to myself, Mark Brown, when we brought him in, he was just a backup.
I'll never forget that night up at Inverness where he basically cost us the league as well.
But Colin, these people are just, I think that they're not stealing a wage, but there's an acceptance at some point that you're actually you're not going to be you're not a player. You're just a backup. And at least on the outfield, there's far more opportunity. There's 5 opportunities a game for you to get a game. Very rarely does a goalie get hooked. I remember Doris de Vries getting hooked one time after the Kilmarnock player scored for about 75 yards. I forget his name. And you know, I didn't think we'd seen him again. That was Craig Gordon back into the team, and the rest, as they say, is history. So I'm going to say that it would be a massive, massive statement if that was to happen this weekend, Colin. If it does, I think there's maybe then question marks around the signing of Sinisalo. I'm taking it for granted Sinisalo steps in because he's been on the bench more often than not.
Yeah, I think logic would say that is the case, but sometimes with Rodgers' team selections, logic can just go out the window. And for me, I think there's been other opportunities this season to give Sinisalo a game. I know the early round in the League Cup, I think he got injured just before the game, and it became Kasper Schmeichel started and Scott Bain was the backup. There's been a couple of times this season, I don't know whether it's been down to injury or if it's just been down to other things, where Scott Bain's been the backup goalkeeper and Sinisalo's not been in the squad. So I don't know. There's just something that wouldn't really surprise me if Scott Bain started tomorrow, just because Rodgers knows what he's getting from him. Now, I don't think Scott Bain had his time when he came in at first. That performance at Ibrox when he was signed, basically played the next day. He did really well. But anytime he's been thrown into the Celtic mix over the last sort of 2-3 seasons, he's not really coloured himself in glory. And as you say, I think he's now accepting that point where his job's to turn up to Lennoxtown 4 or 5 times a week, whatever they train. He's the sort of third choice keeper. He's the sort of Scott Carson of the Celtic team, where he's going to pick up a medal at the end of the season. He's been picking up a fairly decent wage. But I don't know. I really hope Sinisalo plays because I think he's got a big future. He did really well at Exeter last season. Villa were kind of hoping to keep a hold of him as well. But if he doesn't, as you say, if he doesn't start Sinisalo tomorrow, then you're starting to think, right, in the summer, are we going to need to bring someone else in?
Well, that would be a concern. Someone suggested the other day Sinisalo was a club signing and Schmeichel was a Rodgers signing. Listen, who knows? Who knows if that's the case? Sinisalo for me plays this weekend. Let's have a look at him. Let's have a look at him in a really meaningful game. No disrespect to Wraith Rovers earlier in the season. You've got to win every cup game. But we're going to win that game, and you can tinker with the team slightly. I'm bringing this up because it came into the conversation.
It's so bad.
Bruni is looking at it going, seriously, guys, this is the jersey. Well, I've got it, and I've got it in long sleeve, and I'm getting it signed with as many Excelts as I possibly can. We're going to then get it framed up. Do you think anyone will buy it?
No. They'll probably pay you to keep it.
It's for charity. Someone should buy it. Someone will buy it. And we're starting to get the signatures on it. We're not getting it done with a pink marker either. But yeah, there's the jersey right there. There's the one right there. And by the way, the socks were terrible. Never worn. Do you have it? What do you think? I think it would have been better if it was black with the yellow chevron, a luminous yellow chevron and the yellow detail.
I don't get the chevron at all, though. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, it was kind of in vogue for a while, wasn't it? Man U had it, didn't they? Man U had the chevron. I don't know who made the kit, maybe Nike. But it's when I see a chevron on a football jersey, I just think Adrianians.
Was this New Balance's last season?
Well, we're just having a laugh then.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like a kind of, we know you're leaving, so there's a kind of...
Aye. Let's chuck it in. I always use this story when Kevin Graham was still allowed to attend fans' forums. He tells a story that there was a discussion had in and around the design of a new jersey for Celtic, an away jersey. And it was during the time in New Balance. Kev will tell the story better than I. This is obviously I'm just recounting it as hearsay. And there was a discussion around the colour scheme of a new away / third jersey under New Balance. And some of the options that were kind of put forward were brown, because they were into this link with the St. Pauli fan base at the time.
Yeah.
The other thing that they put forward was the possibility of a maroon away jersey. And then the third option was blue. And they'd obviously done all this research in relation to sales of certain colours around the globe, and blue was a massive, sports seller in the States. They wanted to tap into that. And someone, seriously, Colin, someone had to point out the reasons why a blue Celtic jersey might not have worked.
There's a reason why New Balance aren't really into football anymore. They're a very American-style team. I've sent you a picture on WhatsApp, by the way. If you bring that up and do a comparison.
Okay, I don't know what this picture is, but you've given me permission to use it, and use it I shall. Is this still kit talk? Is it right? In the meantime, let us know what you think of this kit. Are we giving it such a bad time for no reason? Is it as bad as we think it is? I'm just downloading this image as we speak, and I'll bring it up. In the meantime,
from what I've heard for next season, it does sound as though we're going to go and bring back the Bumblebee, which, if I'm correct, is that Adidas' first attempt at the Bumblebee?
It would be, yes.
Yeah. So I think that'll be quite interesting. I think there's going to be a white kit as well, from what I'm hearing. So, I love the Bumblebee. I think the Bumblebee is really iconic. There's sort of 3 or 4 away type jerseys that I think you can associate Celtic with. I think you've got the Love Street sort of dark green style kit, which was beautiful, and then they brought one out a couple of years ago, which was every bit as good. You've got the Bumblebee, which is so iconic as well. Then you've got the sort of that sort of colour that's behind you. That's been a staple in quite a few of the kits. And then the sort of white traditional Celtic away kit, whether it be with the tartan that was the tartan shorts a couple of years ago, which was really nice, or the 125th jersey, which was just the white and the black. I think if you go from beyond, if you stick to that and sort of rotate it over the seasons and stick to that sort of palette, you'll do well. But when you come out with stuff like this, that was just totally out the blue. And as I say, all it reminds me of is exactly what I sent you, and I'm sure you'll get it up in a couple of seconds.
I am going to show you exactly what you sent me just in a moment or two, right? Because you're right. And then I'm going to show you something. Anybody out there who's technically minded might be able to help us, right? So give me a wee second, and I'll show you this first. And then I'm going to show you something that I want to add onto our website, Acsom.net. I'm going to share a screen here, and hopefully this will work. Here we go. Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to do, right? So when I was doing the Celtic jersey book, this was what I was using. This was my method of, I'll get rid of Scott Brown. This was my method of keeping track of all the Celtic jerseys. So we took images of every single Celtic jersey. You can see me scrolling through them. Everything we came into contact with, I got an image, and it wasn't just a full frontal. It was like, close-up images of jerseys. Look, you thought I was a geek before. Look at me now. We were looking at taking images of the neck tag, particularly some of the foreign jerseys, because the manufacturers were really obscure. I mean, look at this. What is this team here? Who is this? Celtic played them because Neely Mockin swapped the jersey. Look at that. This is a resource in itself. Loads of these jerseys never made it into the book. Look at some of this. This is incredible. Yeah, look at that. That's Bao or Basel. There you go. You might have been at some of these games as well. That's where because we've got one of Karl Heinz Riedler's jerseys in here. Look at that. That's beautiful. No, but look, this is a resource that I have access to and nobody else does. And I want to share it with the Celtic fans because this is history. Look at this. It goes on and on and on.
Absolute classic.
It's unbelievable. I wanted somehow, we might even have just played a testimonial game, and Neely's ended up with the Man United goalie jersey. Look, these are incredible things, and I want to share this with the Celtic fan base on Acsom.net. So if anybody can give me a wee bit of advice, I think this is maybe Nottingham Forest. Let's have a look. Yeah, look at that. Wrangler. That'll be right up Double Denim Street if you're watching. And of course, we've got all the Celtic jerseys as well. That's a team called Coca-Cola. We beat them 11-0. Look at that. Unbelievable. This is an archive that only I have access to. I want to share it with the Celtic fan base. Look at that. I'm telling you, 2,500 photos. There's a few other folders in there as well. All the jerseys. Look at that. T-shirts, tracksuit tops, all match worn. No replicas. They're all in there. So anybody who's switched off actually thinks that I am far too much of a geek. Now, that there, see that whistle was Jock Stein's whistle, right? So there's two whistles. One of them was Jock Stein's and one of them was Neely Mawkins. And these are the ones that were used at training. I've got other images of both of them. And you can see the images, obviously, the shoelace collar around the wrist, a Jock, and around the wrist. And the only way you can differentiate between whose was whose, Jock had a white lace and Neely had a black lace. But we've still got the laces, unbelievable. We've still got the whistles, unbelievable.
It just shows you, though, the advancements and things like that. That's literally a shoelace.
I know.
That whistle, it's crazy.
This collection is crazy. So if you think the book was an amazing collection, this is maybe, I would say, 5 to 10 times more information. And I want to share it. Look, even the old jackets, the old training jackets, right? Old managers, that was Big Billy's manager's jacket in the 1980s. This is an amazing collection, and as I say, it's my ball and I want to keep it. I want to share this. So if anybody can tell me how we are able to share that archive on Acsom.net, let me know, because I want to do it and I want to share it, because there's other geeks out there, Colin, that want to see this kind of thing.
And I see Double Denim's in the chat, so
is he?
He's saying somebody shouted Wrangler at me one time. At least I think they said Wrangler. So
yeah.
What have you started here?
I know, it's a shame for Double Denim. He gets loads and loads of stick, right? There we go. No, but thank you very much. I've got so much to share, and there must be a quick way of doing it, because obviously to download and upload and that's going to take forever. There must be a way. There you go. Yeah, I will be careful to not open the full frontal folder. Thanks for the advice, Rob Lilly. A wee insight into the way that my brain works. That was my document for the Celtic jersey book.
Were you able to get my comparison to that silver and pink jersey?
I'm just uploading it, mate. I'm uploading it as we speak. Let me see if it's uploaded yet, because it is quite incredible. And I'm not quite sure what you were searching for when you found this particular image.
If you don't remember this, then you've never seen Saturday Night TV under. Like, that was that pink jersey. Come on, you can't tell me that's what it was modelled on, surely. Hole in the wall.
Who's that guy in the middle again?
Anton Dubek.
I'm going to replace him using AI and fire Scott Brown in instead. Anyway, enough of the nonsense. We've got some serious stuff to talk about as well. So I'm going to welcome to the show Paul once again. Paul, it's been a long time since we've spoken. How are you, pal?
I'm not too bad, mate. I was trying to remember when the last time I was on. I think it might have been Angie's first season, so it has been a while, but it's good to see you all again.
Yeah. Paul, I hope you never saw that comparison there. We're doing some early 2010s Saturday Night TV shows comparing.
I wasn't even going to mention it, mate. I was just going to read past it and pretend I hadn't seen it, rather than understand what the context might have been.
You were sitting in the waiting room going, if I joined the correct stream here, I thought this was meant to be a Celtic podcast, right? Obviously, we welcome you to the show. You are representing Fans Against Criminalisation. We've been talking about it all week in relation to the protest this Saturday. In terms of the background, Fans Against Criminalisation, I think we'll tip your hat to the great work that was done with the revocation of the legislation, offensive behaviour at the Football Act. It was historical, Paul. This being introduced into the Scottish game in 2012. I think it was 2018 it was finally repealed. Massive amount of credit to you guys. Tell us a wee bit, because from the outside looking in, as a casual observer, I'm looking at this situation saying, right, they've got rid of the legislation, but they still want to have the same powers. They're still targeting football fans. Where are we with regards to the treatment of football fans at the moment, Paul?
So I think in terms of placing it within the context of the Offensive Behaviour Act and everything that our support has broadly experienced going back almost 15 years now is the only way that we can really understand this. So I think we've obviously seen a sort of sustained attack, I would argue, specifically on the Celtic support, but it really negatively impacted fans all across the country from that 2011-2012 period onwards. But then when they lost those legislative powers in 2018, at different points, we've seen them, still harassing fans. And my argument was always that even if those that law wasn't there and that wasn't a power that police officers around football had, that culture of viewing football fans as a sort of perennial criminal threat has never really left the minds of police officers. If you've been trained for 7-8 years to be told your job is to go out and arrest anyone who does anything offensive, here's all the resources we'll give you, here's all the political support we'll give you. When, 8 years down the line that law is repealed, your mindset doesn't just switch back overnight. And I think we've been dealing with the kind of cultural fallout of that ever since. What I would say is that by and large, though, we haven't seen the sort of large-scale harassment for a long time that unfortunately was visited upon the guys in the Green Brigade 2 weeks ago, and it sort of brought it all back into focus now, which is why I'm back to discuss it, I guess.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's been a topic of discussion, really, Paul, for at least the last week, but certainly since the Rangers game. And what the kind of message I'm putting out here is anyone can get caught up in this, because there is now a mindset. There's this culture that you're talking about within the authority, whereas football fan or Celtic fan equals bad, and they've already got it in their mind. They're going to, and I've said this about the ultra movement. You mentioned the Green Brigade there, and I just feel that there's never been an acceptance by the authorities. I'm going to ask you this as well, Colin, as a football going fan on supporters buses, etc., who get stopped because there might be a 6-pack and all this kind of stuff, like really targeting football fans to the nth degree. They view ultras as hooligans. They view ultras like these casuals back in the 1980s and 90s, which obviously is completely wrong. The ultra movement wasn't about violence, Colin. It wasn't about disruption, was it?
No, so I think, that kind of point you make about how Scotland has sort of managed or tried to come to terms with the ultra movement has been really backwards and regressive. So a couple of months ago, I read an article that Keith Jackson published in the Daily Record. And some of the language was some of the most classist, hateful stuff you'll ever read. And it cited 3 examples of, ultras being out of control in the country. One of them was the smoke bomb affair or whatever it was down at Aston Villa. Mm-hmm. One of them was Motherwell fans' apparent abuse of Stuart Kettlewell. And the other was Engels being hit by the lighter at Ibrox. And not a single one of those instances were anything to do with any single ultras group or section or whatever, as far as I'm aware. But the language with which it's just so commonly kind of spoken about, ultras are this threat, they are this movement that is a danger to kind of Scottish football. And, I do think sometimes that Scottish football pundits treat Scotland as though we're the only country in the world that has rival fans that are passionate about their club and passionate about their rivalry. We're the only country that has this ultra element, and it's so deluded, and it's from a country that still has per capita the highest attendance of football anywhere in the world. What we have to put up with in terms of everything from ticket prices to Celtic support, kick-off times away on Sundays, to how we're treated by the police, to how we're spoke about in the media. I think it's disgraceful. It's not as much as I'm happy with what was achieved during the FAC campaign, getting rid of the OBFA. I don't think that the sort of institutions of Scotland and Scottish football have learned anything from it, and that really still bothers me. And even I was messaging one of the boys in the kind of Green Brigade today, who was talking a little bit about the Palestine action that they've been doing in terms of show Israel the red card. And I'll read the message here, and it was something along the lines of, now at this point there's been 174 actions that have started from Scotland across 142 clubs, 34 countries and 6 continents. But if either of you can show me an article or a radio show phone-in that's non-Celtic aligned, that's discussing how the ultras movement and fans in Scotland have actually kicked off this massive positive campaign across the world, then I'd be stunned. But those discussions don't occur. There's a constant focus on the negatives, and it's created a situation whereby when the police act out like that, they know that they're going to have institutional support.
Well, that's the thing for me. It's like anytime there's sort of bad press to be made, it's 6-7 pages. As you mentioned, Keith Jackson, he loves a dig at Celtic fans at any opportunity he gets. It's 6-7 pages in this paper, it's in that paper. There's talk on phone-ins, there's talk on national news about the bad side of what they class as the bad side of this, and the trouble and all this. But then, as you mentioned, the show of support and solidarity for the Palestinian people, the food bank collections that happen on a more regular basis, the charity element of what the Ultras movement at Celtic certainly has done, the amount of good things that the team has done for the atmosphere, for everything else at Celtic, there isn't enough focus put on that. So anytime you see something in the newspapers, as Paul, you were saying, football fans in this country, and I said it last week, we're treated like a third-class citizen, and any attempt to point score is put into the papers. Whether it be, I don't know, say someone was caught drunk driving, Celtic fan caught drunk driving, absolutely nothing at all to do with the story, but it's a point scoring exercise. And that's the way that I feel, certainly from my opinion, that we are treated in this country as a fan of football. Now, if I was an Edinburgh Rugby fan, or if I was a Glasgow Warriors or anything like that, they're not going to say Glasgow Warrior fans caught drunk driving. It only comes out when it's football related, and that is part of the overall bigger problem in this country.
The obvious comparison for me is concerts. Now, I'm not having a go at it. I imagine most of us go to concerts. But in terms of arrests, in terms of violent incidents, there is no comparison between the disorder that you see at most large concerts compared to the disorder you see at football matches. But it's framed in an entirely different way. And as I say, I think we as a support have sort of, you made the point before, this isn't just the Ultras and the other people were caught up in it. And I think we as a support, we've already been through this, right? Don't get me wrong, there'll be younger elements who maybe don't remember the dark days of the OBFA. But most of us have been through this now. We remember what happened in 2011. Quite a few of us were saying at the time, look, this is going to be bigger than, the Ultras groups. This is going to be bigger than even Celtic. And what we've seen over the years was, hundreds of young, largely working class young men who were either dragged out of their bed or dragged out of the stand and fired through a very haphazard criminal justice system and had their lives turned upside down. And my hope would be is that, what we managed to do really successfully, I think, as a support, was kind of unite around those people and unite around that issue. I don't imagine, in terms of people who, particularly those who travel to away games or maybe come in a bus to home games, anyone who was watching Celtic, going to Celtic games throughout that period, will probably know at least one person who was affected by that. It was something that had real impact across the board. But for me, there's also a bit of a blueprint there as to how we managed to deal with it then. And hopefully we can nip this in the bud, because I don't think I've got another 7-8 year campaign in me, to be honest. And hopefully we can prevent it from getting to that point.
The question I'd ask on this is, why now? Why do you think now is the reason that there has been this increased presence over the last I'd say it's been probably since the turn of the year. I don't think the last Saturday or last Sunday's event, whatever, I can't remember the day. Try and forget that game. That event was a one-off. It is happening week in and week out, and it's not just Celtic or Rangers or Hearts or Hibs. It's happening all over the country where fans are being targeted by the powers that be. For me, and I don't want to go too far down that line, I just think that it's very convenient that there's a parliamentary election in Scotland next year, and it does feel as though it's almost a sort of movement to say this is what we're going to try and bring through at the next government.
Well, what I would say is, even in my discussions over the last week with, Celtic fans, different fans, I've been hearing more stories about how it has happened to people at other clubs. Hibs fans particularly go to Tynecastle, Hamilton fans as well, and they get smaller numbers. They don't quite have the mass that can sometimes protect people that follow Celtic. Also doesn't always get the same kind of press that Celtic or Rangers would typically get. So it's something that's broader than just Celtic already. And as I say, the OBFA shows as soon as these powers start being used on us, it really is a matter of time before it's countrywide. I really wish I had a short, snappy answer as to why I think it's happening. I think you're right in that there's two similarities with what happened in 2011. One was, there's the political context, but also I think there's the context of slashes to social services and budgets. That was happening in 2011. We're in the peak of austerity under Cameron and Osborne. We're heading back into that period, and I wonder how much of it is Police Scotland attempting to claim or justify the resources that they have. Yeah. But beyond that, my experience of policing around football is quite simple. It's that if you give them a power, any power at all, they will use that to its nth degree, which is why it has to be kept on a relatively short leash, and there has to be transparency and accountability. But when they're able to use a really broad brush to target large groups of people, as they were with the OBFA, as they're attempting to do now with Section 60 emergency powers, they will use that to the nth degree, and lots of people will be trapped within that. So I don't know. I've heard theories from, I know they had American and Canadian police officers over last week as delegates ahead of the World Cup next year to learn from Police Scotland. For the sake of any international supporters, I hope they don't take anything away from that and enact it next year. But I do think that regardless of what their motives are and how clear that will become, how tied that is to the government or whatever it may be, it's something that we'll probably be trying to wrestle with for a while. But for me, I think at this point the priority has to be trying to get people out to send a message so that, as I say, we can try and nip this in the bud and not, as a collective, have another kind of long fight in our hands.
Yeah, I mean, the reaction on Acsom, when we look at the show every day, Paul, has been extremely positive in supporting the fans group. And what I love to see, because you're right, the positivity, the ripple effect, of the Palestinian display, the original one, ends up on the backdrop of Roger Waters touring the world. So the ripple effect is massive. It puts it on the kind of mainstream. And then you look at, I didn't realise, I knew there was over 100 demonstrations or similar clubs getting involved with regards to give Israel the red card, but to find out today that there's over 170, that is astonishing. That is astonishing, and that shows you the global reach that one action positively can have all around the globe. And I see tomorrow as another positive action. And what I like about it, Paul, is the amount of different groups that are coming together tomorrow. So give us a wee bit of more of an idea of what's actually happening at London Road Police Station tomorrow before the game.
So I wasn't actually at the meetings for the week whereby some of the different organisations discussed this. But what I would say is that if you think back to the Kettling incident that happened in the Gallagate 12 years ago in 2013, which was probably the largest scale disorder anyone of my age had ever seen at football, in terms of how police sort of attacked, kettled and arrested as many Celtic supporters as they could that day. And the specific issue with that was, Celtic supporters walking up the Gallagate for some reason was a big threat, and they sought to stop that. But what happened, if we remember, I can't remember if it was 1 week or 2 weeks later, but whenever the next home game was after that, what we done was we collectively called for a fan demonstration at George Square where it would walk up the same route. And because it wasn't just 200 bodies this time, it was thousands. It made not just Sky Sports News, it was running on Sky News, and the police could not attack a small minority of the support when we all came out in force. And it really, I think, was a huge symbolic victory, but it also sent a really clear message to the police that we as a collective, doesn't matter if you're an older fan that goes and sits in the main stand, or if you a wife and a husband that go and sit elsewhere, or if you're a younger ultra, that we were very much united, and we wouldn't allow one group or demographic to be attacked in that way. And I think that's exactly what we're calling for tomorrow. It's been signed off by, as you say, all of the main supporter organisations, the Celtic, the CSA, the affiliation, the Irish, the American Association, as well as the Celtic Trust, the Boys Against Brigade, and Fans Against Criminalisation. So there's a broad range of the support that has organised and signed off on this. And what I expect to see today tomorrow is, a real diversity in the crowd. It won't just be, 100 young guys dressed in dark green. It will be just as those demos have been before, whereby hopefully people come out in really large numbers to kind of stand together. It will be, good natured. There won't be any trouble in my view, and we'll be able to then head from the demonstration up to the game, and hopefully see the team get back to it. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's a really positive action. I think that it's important that it's not left to the ultras groups handle this. I think it's too easy for the media to paint them in a certain way. And I think that, for the rest of us, we'll get a bit of a responsibility to go out and back, the groups if we can. And as I say, history tells us quite clearly that it might start with the ultras groups, but if we allow it, it's not going to finish that way. So we've all got a vested interest in trying to get behind this.
Yeah. And I think also a Celtic State of Mind has a responsibility to cover this, Paul, and to cover it in a positive fashion. So, for example, in the future, if there's any other instance where you think it's relevant to come on and have a chat with us, you're always welcome. And also, Liam Carrigan on the blog has been covering this closely as well. So a wee update on there, I think, would be good. Anything at all that you want to ask in the future, let us know in the comment section. We'll get that back to Paul. Listen, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time, Paul. Good luck tomorrow. Yep. And if you need to come back on, just drop me a wee email and we'll have another chat, mate.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks very much, boys. Hopefully it'll all go well. And I'll be happy to come back on the next couple of weeks if there's more updates in terms of the campaign and stuff. All right.
Man, you take care. Speak to you again, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Colin. It's been a topic of conversation, and I continually say this: not everybody wants to even hear about this discussion. No. And I think the angle that I'll always go back to is the fact that, yes, at the moment, the ultras seem to be the point of target. It could be us next. It just could be anybody next, depending on, at the moment, there's a focus on the tifos, there's a focus on pyro. And the point that was made earlier this week is, what if the focus goes to the type of flag or the type of clothing that you're wearing to the game?
That's the thing. I know there's some, just reading the comments as we were discussing there, that people obviously want to say that there's certain things that we should condemn, and certainly when it comes to the likes of violent actions, that should be condemned. But things like tomorrow should be lauded for, fingers crossed, it being a peaceful demonstration of the basic human rights that people were denied that day. And the idea that we as football fans are not all criminals. There's probably as much trouble, as Paul was saying there, the percentage per capita of fans that go to Scottish football, if you were to enlarge that and make that into rugby or make that into any other sport, you're guaranteed almost to get the exact same amount of trouble, because it's a very, very small percentage. It's not like if there's 60,000 fans going to a football game at Celtic Park, you'll be lucky if you're in the tens for the amount of people that get arrested. But because that happens,
I'll tell you why it's a great point. See, when I'm going through, because I've already declared myself as an utter geek by showing you my Dropbox of football jersey images. Yeah, I just sit there on a Friday night just scrolling through them, Colin. That's what I do. But when I go through my research, when I'm looking at any point of Celtic's history, what you find is that after big games all throughout the history, pre-ultra, pre-casual, all that kind of stuff, loads of arrests at the football. Mm-hmm. There was always loads of arrests at the football. This is not a new phenomenon. And in actual fact, if we had the data available, I would share it. I bet you there's fewer arrests at the football now than there was back then. But
probably.
one of the big things Paul says, and I always focus on this, if someone is trying to justify their existence in relation to a budget, so I'm looking at Police Scotland here, they will make sure that they can justify their existence. They will have data to say, this is what we've done, this is the response. And as you know, with numbers, Colin, you can skew them to suit your own narrative.
And that's the thing as well. It's coming up to the end of the tax year. Anybody that's from Scotland that's watching along today will probably have noticed in recent weeks the amount of roadworks that's coming up in their area, because that's another department using up their budget, so they've got it for next year. He's right, it all comes down to budgets. When it comes down to this time of year and the budgets are being reset, if you're saying that you're worth X amount of pounds a year from the public purse, you're almost going out your way to show why you deserve that. And sometimes things like that, it just takes it to the extreme level where it's completely unnecessary, because they can, really.
See, this also touches on one thing, one final point before we finish the last 5-6 minutes talking football and getting some comments in, Colin. When people say, keep politics out of football, well, you can't when they're using political legislation, government-led legislation to target football fans. So how can we keep politics out of football when these people, you look at the revocation of the legislation, who are they asking to put cases forward? Politicians. Politics is deeply embedded in football. So when these things come up, we need to actually discuss them, and we'll always discuss it, as well as discussing labels on obscure foreign football teams that Celtic might have played in the 60s. We talk about everything Celtic related. Now, Paddy, brilliant that you were there last night. I'm delighted you were there last night. You're watching on YouTube. Thanks for a great night at Bad. Amazing work by Acsom on behalf of young Jamie. We are constantly raising funds for wee Jamie Tierney.
Yeah, I've seen Double Denim doing a fundraiser as well. He's done fantastically well as well. So keep that going. Well done. Yeah,
smashed through his target. Every single video that we put out, the link to wee Jamie's fundraiser is underneath it. And then when we do a live event, that's a good kind of opportunity, I think, with 350 fans under the one room to say, look, even if everybody throws in a quid, we can make a few quid for this wee guy every month. And in the first 2 months of this year, we've been able to put £500 into the pot, and it looked like last night we'll probably do the same. And over a year, just at our live events, Colin, if we can raise £6,000 for wee Jamie, it's 10% of what his family needs for and that's just the live events. Then you look at everything else that can be done. The whole setup and production was of the highest order. Makes you proud to be part of the Celtic family up Acsom. Thank you, Paddy. That means the world to us. Thanks very much for that. Sorry, Colin, I cut you off there, mate.
No, I was just going to say, it's things like that don't get enough attention, as I was saying earlier. When you've got the idea of Celtic fans doing good, you don't get the same publicity as if something happens. So it's good to keep getting this word out, and good for all the Acsom fans and everyone that comes along to help what is a horrible situation for young Jamie's family. And I've had the chance to meet them once or twice, and they're a great family, and I know how much they really appreciate that. So congratulations to everyone.
If we are able to raise 10 let's say 10% or 15 or 20% of the total, then it gets to the point where you can get a lot of endeavours to get involved, be that local businesses, local charity endeavours like this, then they will get to the target every single year. Charity funds raised, going back to the point that you made, so far since we started in 2017, let me just come up to the total. At the moment, we have raised £113,608.15.
Unbelievable.
If I put that out on social media this afternoon, Colin, right, it will get very little traction. If I put something out scandalous, it will get loads of traction. And that's just the world that we live in, mate. So we're up against that as well. It won't hit the algorithm because it's a good news story.
No, and it's horrible that's the way of the world. But all you can do is do your bit and just continue to try and make the world a better place. And speaking of a better place, should we go for some Fergie time today? We've not had a lot of time to discuss the game tomorrow, so I'm good to run over for a couple of minutes. Is the chat good to stay and listen to our thoughts on tomorrow's game?
I think so. There's a few comments coming in. You said Fergie time there. I thought you were talking about Barry Ferguson, because
no, come on.
He doesn't have an issue with Tierney and his behaviour, but obviously, we'll target fans instead. Yes, we do have a lot of comments coming through. I'm going to give you my starting 11, Colin. This is my starting 11, right? So I'm guessing Schmeichel's out, so Sinisalo comes in goals. And I think what you need, obviously in goals, I think what you need for a back four is you need the back four to really step up. And I'm looking at CCV here. And Alistair Johnston's had one bad game, so I'm not going to put him in the same category. I don't think CCV's been firing on all cylinders yet this season. So I'm looking at him. He starts. Alistair Johnston's at right back. Schloop's at left back. The big question for me, it's all about fitness, of course. If everybody's fit, Trusty starts alongside CCV for me. We've obviously got Nawrocki, and we've also got your man, Liam Scales. So we'll start off with the defence. There's my defence. Colin, what's yours?
See, I'm Sinisalo. Johnson's a difficult one for me. I think he had a bit of a torrid time during the international break as well. He wasn't at his high level. Again, it's a big game tomorrow, and you want your big game players to turn up. I thought Ralston was okay for Scotland. The first game he was pretty good. Second game sort of exposed a little bit. Although you wouldn't know that listening to the commentary because Ralston wasn't playing. It was Ralston that was playing.
I know. How dare they?
Terrible. But the centre half positions, that's the big one for me tomorrow. As you said, Carter Vickers, I think he needs to show a bit more leadership in that role and be the commanding point of the whole back line. I believe Scales is out for the season. I don't think we'll see Scales the rest of the season. I think he needs an operation. Is that right?
On his face. All right.
Yeah.
That's a shame. That's a shame.
Yeah. The other centre half, do you go with Nawrocki, who had a fairly decent performance against Rangers? Do you go with Trusty, who... And I'll tell you the reason why I wouldn't go with Trusty tomorrow is if Hearts go with Cabangu up front, I worry about his physicality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we saw it against St Mirren a couple of weeks ago when he was coming up against Lasagna. He probably had one of his worst games in a Celtic jersey up against him. Cabangu's a similar type striker. He's quick, he's strong, he's physical. For me, I think Nawrocki's not done enough to be dropped. I think you have to go Carter Vickers and Nawrocki, and then in that left back position, Schloop probably keeps the jersey over Taylor. The thing with Taylor is obviously he's here. We don't know what his idea is for next season. I think the press will tell you that he's gone. But if that's the case, going on the way that Rodgers has traditionally handled players like that, he shouldn't even be in the squad. So the fact that he's still in the squad suggests to me that Rodgers still thinks there's a chance of keeping him. So I still think you go Schloop, but the centre half and the right back is up for debate for me. If you can get the best out of them, you go Johnston and Nawrocki.
Nawrocki, it's an interesting shout because I do think he played well against Rangers. I've said this a few times over the last fortnight. Watched the game back. No great passer of the ball, no very fast, but see defensively. And he had to defend. He had to defend because we kept giving the ball away. He was brilliant at that side of the game. I'd love to see stats, his aerial duels. And I know that he's now played over that threshold of 900 minutes. Alan Morrison likes 900 minutes of data before he can actually dig in and compare him to other players, etc. Colin, it'd be interesting to see where he is in that kind of league table. There's been a few games. I remember when he came on in the game for Stephen Welsh, got an early injury, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Came on. And he did well. I thought he did well in that game as well against Rangers. So, yeah, if he plays, your point about the physicality up top, and it's a bit of a worry with Trusty, because I think Simon Murray dominated him as well at Dens this season. He needs to step up. If he wants to play with Celtic, he needs to step up. It's the age-old tale. You come up against a Livingston team over the last few years, or you come up against a team like St Mirren or Dundee, Motherwell. They will try and play a big bruiser up against a guy like Trusty, and they'll target him.
And that's the thing, if he's not fully fit as well, that's another risk you're putting in there. If he's up to speed, like Trusty against Atalanta was maybe one of the best performances I've seen from a Celtic player this season. I thought he was excellent. Mm-hmm. But then if he's not fit, if he's still carrying a niggle, you're putting him up against a striker like Cabangu. I just don't think it's a risk worth taking. I think everybody at this point in the season's got to be 100% switched on and 100% fit. So if there's any risks to players at this point, you just don't take them, especially now that we're starting to see that squad depth growing a little bit with the likes of Bernardo and McGregor coming back fit. So I think for that reason, you go with Nawrocki. So as I said, Sinisalo, Johnson, Carter Vickers, Nawrocki and Schloop tomorrow. I think that's your back five.
Let's move into the midfield. And again, we'll be expecting a few updates today, Colin, when the gaffer's in the press conference. If McGregor's fit, he plays, obviously. And I think the other discussions around Luke McKeown, Rio Hatate, Annie Engels, and Paulo Bernardo. I'm going to ask you first, who's your midfield three?
See, I'm probably going to go against everything I've just said there, but if McGregor is anywhere near fit, he'll play. And the reason for that is just the fact that he's the captain. He's been Brendan Rodgers' go-to player. He's the player that he's most comfortable with, that he relies upon so much. And he's obviously had that break now, that hopefully the calf injury's sort of healed. I think he'll go with McGregor, Engels, and Hatate. I think that's his top three. And we were speaking about this last week. It's where Bernardo fits in. I think Bernardo will come off the bench, McKeown coming off the bench. It just helps to rotate that. The one thing that really annoys me is when Hatate goes away on international duty. Because I didn't see the second game, but certainly the first game he never came on. I can't remember it. I don't know if he came on in the second game.
He got some minutes, but not many in the second.
He's travelling that far to then have to travel all the way back, and he's travelling in between for the games as well. That's a lot of toll to put on someone's body, and to then come into such a big game. And I always feel that when Hatate comes back from international duty, he always takes maybe 3 or 4 games to get back up to the level that he was at before. So Hatate's maybe the one that you go, is he the guy that's going to start the game? Could Bernardo or McKeown come in there? But who I would like to see would maybe be Bernardo, just to see if he is back up to speed. But who I think he'll go with will be McGregor, Engels, and Hatate.
I think that's the strongest three who you've just mentioned there. But with the international break, the fitness issues that Bernardo's got, he's coming back fresh. He's coming back ready to play. Hatate might be obviously suffering a wee bit from the travel, etc. And I know it's not like they go into the cattle class like us, Colin.
No.
Everything's luxury and all the rest of that. I get it. But travel takes it out, and big air miles for Hatate this week. We never think like that when it comes to Maeda, because he's just superhuman. But I think if there's going to maybe be a raised eyebrow, it'll be Hatate out for Bernardo. And I say raised eyebrow because people don't think they're the same player, neither do I. But I think there's going to be a wee shuffle there in the pack. I've been championing and standing up for Annie Engels all season. I don't think he was great against Rangers. I don't think he played. I
thought he had a better second half.
A bit like McKeown came into it as well in the second half, didn't he?
The one thing about Engels in that second half of the game was, for me, he was the only one that wanted to get on the ball. If you go back and watch it, and I know it's a hard watch, but if you go back and watch it, he's the one that's move into space, trying to open up the gaps. And there was a lot of players in that game that sort of shied away from wanting the ball or passed the ball backwards or didn't really want to be involved. At least he stood up in that second half and was looking for it. As poor as maybe he might have played, I still think that second half was a vast improvement for him. And for me, he's now got a lot to prove because he's lost his place in the Belgium squad. There's people writing him off. So if he can channel that and put that into his performances between now and the end of the season, I think we'll see the best out of Arne Engels. And
by the way, just going back to yesterday's show with JP, the title of which is quite an important point, the title of which was that Rio and Maeda would be the two guys. I would sign them both up. All the focus is on Maeda just now. Keep them both at the football club is my opinion, right? And someone in the comments said, shameful comments about Hatate. What, that I want to keep him? How is that shameful? We move into the forward three then. And obviously people will be saying maybe Ida deserves a start. Maybe Kuhn's not been playing too well. Who's your forward three, Colin?
I think for tomorrow's game, if Maeda is back from his injury, which I think he was because he was on the bench for Japan, wasn't he?
Yeah,
so
game time.
He's on the bench, even ahead of... We've got to mention this. He was on the bench ahead of Kyogo, who obviously isn't getting the minutes in France. But that whole situation with Kyogo and the Japanese manager is just incredible. It's almost as if he's picked just because he feels as if he has to pick him. And I don't know, that's just a weird one. But Maeda, for me, if he's fit, he's through the middle. I would go with Jota on one side and time to assemble the Yang gang, because I think Yang deserves a start.
Yang gets a start for you. Obviously, big travel for Yang this week as well. But I'm going to stick. I said it earlier in the week. I think Kuhn needs to play through a wee bit of a patchy bit of form. So he starts on the right for me. Jota is coming up to absolute match sharpness. I agree with you against Rangers. There was a couple of times he's running down the left wing and he's running in treacle. You know, you just know that he's not right up to match sharpness yet. But he starts for me as well through the middle. It's made it all day long. Best player in Scotland, 28 goals and counting. Do you agree or disagree in the comment section? Let us know. Colin's also going to give you a wee prediction before we go. Colin.
Oh, prediction. I think tomorrow will be a very open game. I think we'll create a lot of chances, especially if Yang does get to start, because I think he's one of these players that's building on it. I'd like to see Yang getting that opportunity, and then if it doesn't go well, then you can bring Kuhn off the bench, and I think just giving Kuhn some minutes will help him. But if we get an early goal, I think it could be a really exciting game. I'm going to go for 3-1.
3-1, Colin. Just the other day there, two of our contributors said 3-1 as well, so that's quite a popular choice. Let us know in the comments section, how do you see the game going? I'll give you my prediction before the game. I will be joined by Double Denim, who's been getting it tight in the comment section again. Sorry, Chris, if I had anything to do with it. I just seen Wrangler and I thought, Double Denim, it's Chris. If you're out there and you're a whiz kid on the technical side of things, let us know how I can get over 2,500 images from my Dropbox onto my website so that people can actually just view them as a gallery. Just sit there like I do on a Friday night, Colin, you know, just sit there looking at football jerseys, because I'm not a strange guy or anything, right? Thank you, everybody, for getting involved. If you haven't done so already, give us a thumbs up on the YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and if you fancy coming to see Lubo, I say next month, but it's just at the beginning of May, Saturday night, tickets underneath the video. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Thank you to Colin Watt for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Take care.